Have you ever gotten an F just because your handwriting was too neat? My teacher said, "A poor kid can't possibly write like this." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a test. This was a battle. My name is Ava Martinez, a senior at a public high school in Phoenix, Arizona. I always believed that if I studied hard, stayed out of trouble, and kept my head down, I'd eventually get my shot. But the one thing I took pride in, my handwriting, the thing I spent hours perfecting since I was a little girl, ended up destroying everything I had worked for. It started when I turned in my history essay on the Emancipation Proclamation. I spent 3 days writing it. No copy-paste, no help, just me, my pen, and a blank sheet of paper. But when Ms. Valerie Eaton, the new teacher, picked it up, she looked at it like it was evidence in a crime scene. She stared at me, lips pressed tight, and said coldly, "This isn't your handwriting. Poor kids don't write like this. I'm giving you an F for forgery." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. She actually believed I was too poor to have good handwriting. And the worst part? No one in the school would even let me explain. I didn't just lose points. I lost my shot at a scholarship, my belief in fairness, and my respect for the people who were supposed to protect students like me. But I didn't stay quiet. I grabbed my phone, hit record on TikTok, and flipped through my old notebooks. From when I was 7 years old, page after page, looped letters, straight lines, neat margins. Every stroke proved how much effort I'd put into my writing. And overnight, 200,000 views. But that was just the beginning. Because when I pulled back the curtain on that prejudice, I didn't just see Ms. Eaton. I saw a system that was rotten to the core. And if you've ever felt judged because of where you come from, this story is for you. I'm a senior at South Ridge High, a public school on the west side of Phoenix. We don't have a swimming pool, no movie-style football field, and definitely no Teslas in the student parking lot. Here, we study with textbooks from 2009 and use ancient computers that only work if you hit the keyboard just right. But still, I thought this place was fair. I've always been a good student, especially in history. I love how events connect, how revolutions often start with something small, a single sentence, a letter, a line of ink. I spent the summer after 5th grade practicing my handwriting with notebooks passed down from my grandma. She used to be an elementary school teacher in Mexico. Every night, I copied the same sentence. La práctica hace al maestro. Practice makes perfect. You might think I'm exaggerating, but to me, handwriting isn't just handwriting. It's proof. It's my story, told by hand in ink over time. And that's why, when Ms. Valerie Eaton walked into our classroom with designer heels and eyes that scanned us head to toe, I felt uneasy from the start. She had just transferred from a private prep school in Boston. Rumors spread fast. She used to teach the kids of CEOs, worked as an academic advisor for Ivy Leagues, and apparently she had no patience for lazy students. I'm not lazy, but I'm also not the kind of student she was used to teaching. I remember the day we turned in our first essay. It was an analysis of Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. I wrote nearly 2,000 words by hand. No spelling mistakes, no crossouts. I was proud, not because I thought I'd get an A, but because I poured my actual thoughts and feelings into that paper. But when I placed it on her desk, she picked it up like it might be dirty. She looked at me with eyes as cold as steel and said, "Martinez, you expect me to believe you wrote this? With that handwriting?" The whole class went silent. My heart raced. I thought I was about to get praised. Instead, I was pulled aside after class. She said my handwriting was too pretty for a student from this neighborhood. She told me, Working class kids don't have time to practice pretty cursive. This looks suspicious. I let out a nervous laugh. I thought she was joking, but her face didn't budge. She gave me a 0 and said she was reporting me to the office for parent forgery, as if my parents had written it for me. At that moment, I didn't just lose my grade. I lost my right to be myself. I left the classroom with my fists clenched, my chest heavy, and this strange sinking feeling that this wasn't just about an essay anymore. I thought it would end there, a misunderstanding, a conversation, and then everything would be cleared up. But no, that was only the first step in what Ms. Eaton called upholding academic standards, and what I called public punishment. The next day, I was called into the office. On the desk sat my essay, paper-clipped to a bright pink academic dishonesty report. Ms. Eaton had already filled out the violation section. Unverifiable handwriting, likely written by a parent or external party. I remember sitting there, trying to stay calm as the assistant principal read it out loud, like I had just cheated on the SATs. I said, I wrote that with my own hand, at my desk, in my room, late at night. But the look in their eyes said it all. They didn't believe me. I offered to rewrite the whole thing right there in class to prove it, but instead of agreeing, they handed down a temporary solution. From now on, every history assignment I turned in had to be written under Ms. Eaton's direct supervision. During lunch. No friends, no food, just me, my pen, and the constant stare of someone who truly believed no poor kid could ever write that neatly. The first time I walked into the classroom at 11:45 a.m., my stomach was growling, my hands were shaking, and sunlight spilled across the old wooden desk. Ms. Eaton sat right next to me, close enough that I could smell her celery juice and vegan sandwich. Every time I wrote, she'd inch closer, sigh loudly, tap her nails on the desk, and whisper, "No student from this zip code writes like that." I didn't respond, but inside, I was boiling, and the further it went, the less it was about my essay. The rumors started. Emma, whose mom is an artist, got pulled aside because her handwriting was too elegant. Tommy, whose dad designs fonts, was asked why his work looked like it came off a printer. Anyone with good penmanship was now under suspicion. A week later, Ms. Eaton made a public announcement to the whole class. All handwritten assignments must be completed in class, under supervision, no exceptions. No one said a word, but the looks we gave each other were all asking the same thing. What the hell is happening? I left the classroom that day with sore hands and one question stuck on repeat in my mind. If I don't speak up, who's next? Who's going to be accused just for writing too beautifully? I'm not the kind of person who gives up easily. My mom always told me, if your voice isn't heard, let your actions do the talking. So I decided to fight back. Our next assignment was an essay on the Declaration of Independence. I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper, held my pen with my left hand, the one I'd never practiced writing with. I made my handwriting deliberately messy, misspelled a few words, scribbled things out, left awkward gaps. It looked like something a third grader might write while first learning cursive. In short, I dumbed it down, just so Ms. Eaton would finally believe that I was poor enough. I remember how it felt placing that paper on her desk. There was a bitter taste in my mouth, but also a weird sense of relief, because if all she cared about was appearances, then this was the poor kid handwriting she'd been waiting for. A week later, I got the paper back, big red letters across the top, C, and under it, a comment that stopped me cold. Deliberate manipulation, deceptive tactics, Academic dishonesty in form. I froze. Ms. Eaton didn't just not believe me when I wrote well. She now accused me of cheating when I tried to write badly. I looked at her after class when the room had cleared out. She glanced up from her laptop, arms crossed, and said coldly, "Students who forge often try to cover their tracks by pretending to be less capable. I've seen it before." I didn't know what to say. It wasn't just anger bubbling inside me. It was grief, the kind you feel when someone strips away your right to be yourself. And then it got worse. Right after class, I overheard two underclassmen whispering in the hallway. Ms. Eaton said Ava probably hires someone to write her stuff. Yeah, her mom's Mexican anyway. No way she writes like that on her own. I swallowed hard. It wasn't just about doubt anymore. Now my entire background was being mocked. I walked home that day, still holding my ink-smeared paper. No tears, but my chest felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I knew I couldn't wait around anymore. I had to do something, not just to save my grade, but to defend my worth and the worth of every student who's ever been judged in silence, just like me. Midterms arrived. No music, no group work, just 3 hours, 1 pen, and 3 thin blue books to handwrite the entire history exam on the spot. No notes, no bathroom breaks, no mistakes. The prompt: the impact of the Industrial Revolution on 19th century American labor. I swallowed hard as I read it. Images snapped into place like dominoes. Steam engines, textile mills, 12-year-olds working 14-hour days. I wasn't scared of the content. I was scared of the person grading it. I lowered my head and started writing, with the same handwriting I'd spent over 10 years perfecting. Line by line, paragraph by paragraph. I chose my words carefully, underlined key arguments, cited references from after-school readings. By the time I reached the last sentence, my hand was shaking from exhaustion. 3 notebooks, filled to the edge. My shirt stuck to my back with sweat. I looked over my essay one final time and thought, whatever happens, at least I stayed true to myself. A week later, the results came back. The cover page was bleeding red, a giant F in the center. Under it, a scribbled note in red ink. This essay appears memorized. Suspicious consistency and style. Possible academic fraud. Mandatory meeting. I froze. I had written that essay right in front of Ms. Eaton. Nobody else touched my pen. No one helped me. And yet, she still branded me a cheater, even after watching me write it from start to finish. The meeting felt like a trial. I sat across from Ms. Eaton in an empty classroom, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. I looked her straight in the eye and asked, "You watched me write for 3 hours. You know I didn't cheat. So why the F?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot from a teacher forum. A long post titled, "Students are now memorizing parental essays to cheat in class." She stared at me like she had found her smoking gun, the proof she'd been dying to uncover. I couldn't even speak. My throat was dry, my eyes burning. I reached into my backpack and pulled out the arsenal I'd prepared just in case. My 8th grade journal, a handwritten thank you letter with a date stamp, elementary school assignments with ink smudges and bent corners, all in my handwriting, all from when I was 7 years old. I laid them on the desk, one by one, like I was presenting a case file of my entire life. She glanced at them, then said coldly, "These could all be forged. I know your type." I didn't know what she meant by your type. Did she mean girls, Latinas, public school kids, or just people who don't look like her? All I knew was this: I couldn't fight this alone anymore. I needed a final move. a bold one, and I knew exactly who to call. The next morning, I didn't walk into school alone. I walked through the front gate with someone everyone in our neighborhood knew, my mom, Carla Martinez. A 47-year-old woman with a tight ponytail, eyes sharp as knives, and a voice that could silence an entire schoolyard in 3 seconds. If you've ever grown up with a strict Latina mom, you'll understand. Bringing your mom to school isn't a solution. It's a declaration of war. We entered the office just as the second period bell rang. Ms. Eaton was behind her desk, flipping through her gradebook. She looked up and froze for a second when she saw my mom, then put on her professional smile. "Mrs. Martinez, I wasn't expecting you." My mom dropped a stack of papers on the desk, all samples of her own handwriting. Bank forms, time-off requests, notes from the fridge, every single one of them completely unreadable, a chaotic swirl of lines like someone tried writing in a bumpy off-road truck. She looked Ms. Eaton straight in the eye and said calmly, "I can barely write my own name. You think this wrote college-level essays?" I stood beside her, silent, just watching as Ms. Eaton began to shift uncomfortably in her seat, her hands clasped under the desk like she was trying to find an anchor. But my mom wasn't finished. She pulled out an old handwriting notebook from her purse, one of mine, from second grade. She flipped to the first few pages where I had written the same sentence over and over again in purple ink. "Practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect." Then she turned to Miss Eaton and said, "Pick any topic, anything. Let my daughter write it, right here, right now. You can watch." Ms. Eaton scoffed, thinking my mom was being dramatic, but what she didn't know was that I was ready. "Fine," she said, "write about the Zoot Suit riots." An obscure topic, rarely covered. I nodded, opened my notebook, picked up my pen, and started writing. No phone, no notes, no internet, just me, and 30 minutes of complete silence. I wrote about Chicano culture, about the 1943 riots in Los Angeles, about racial tension, systemic bias, and cultural identity during wartime, line by line, word by word. Every stroke of my pen was a blow to the mask of distrust Ms. Eaton had worn all along. When I finished, I handed over the paper. She held it side by side with my midterm exam, comparing the loops in every Y and G, the spacing between lines, the slant of the letters. She didn't say anything, but I saw it. Her face changed color, from pink to red and red to pale. I suppose they do match," she finally said, her voice tightening. "But you can't be too careful. Academic integrity is important." I nodded, but in my mind, I already knew. The war on paper was over. Now it was time to move to the public front, because I had saved everything. The emails, the texts, the biased remarks, the copies of my essays. I had the receipts, and I was about to turn this entire story into a social media reckoning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed flipping through every wrongly graded test, every red mark that cut across the page like a wound. I opened my phone and watched the video my mom had filmed earlier that day. No zooms, no edits, just me sitting in front of Ms. Eaton, writing the essay from start to finish. Then I reached under my desk and pulled out a small box. Inside were all the things I'd kept. Thank you notes to friends, essays from 5th grade, journals, notebooks, even the handwriting workbook my grandma sent me from Mexico when I was 7. I laid them all out on my bed like a tiny exhibition. Every loop of ink was a memory. Every page was proof. And then I hit record. I filmed a TikTok. No filters, no dramatic music, just me, my handwriting, and the truth. POV, your teacher thinks you're too poor to have good handwriting. I flipped through page after page, holding each one close to the camera. 2nd grade, 5th grade, 7th, dates visible, smudged ink, old folds and worn corners. I didn't need to say much. I let the paper speak for itself. The video was 1 minute and 35 seconds long. I posted it at 11:42 p.m. 10 minutes later, 137 views. 30 minutes, over 10,000. By the time I woke up the next morning, 200,000. The comments section exploded like wildfire. Wait, this happened to me in 10th grade too. My teacher said the same thing. Your writing doesn't match your background. Bro, why is handwriting still even a thing? Expose her name. Expose the school. We got your back. That morning, I passed by Ms. Eaton's classroom. She was glued to her phone, face red as a tomato. Every few seconds, she'd glance around the hallway like someone was watching her. Her fingers moved non-stop across the screen, probably scrolling through comments or texting someone in panic. By lunch, I got an email from the principal's office. We ask that you take the video down immediately to avoid harming the reputation of staff and the school. Continued sharing of this content may be considered cyberbullying. I didn't respond. I knew they didn't care about the truth. They only cared about the optics. That afternoon, I was walking to the parking lot when I saw her, Ms. Eaton, standing in front of my car. She was holding her phone, and her eyes were trembling. "You're ruining my career," she said, her voice cracking. "You entitled kids think you can destroy teachers just for pushing back." I took out my phone, said nothing, and hit go live. She took half a step back, but she kept talking, louder, tighter. A group of students nearby started filming too. Every word she said landed straight into the live stream. Right then, my phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Call me. My mom saw the video. She's on the school board. She wants to meet you." I looked up at Ms. Eaton. She saw the message. Her eyes flickered, and then she whispered, almost begging, "Please, delete it before tomorrow's meeting." I didn't say a word, but in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This was no longer about me and her. This was about a generation fighting for justice with the one thing we've always had silenced, our voice. That night, I didn't post another video, no live stream, no updates. I spent the whole evening reading comments, messages, and emails. Hundreds of students from all over reached out. People I didn't know, from states I'd never been to, from schools no one talks about. But every message echoed the same truth. I got graded down because of my handwriting too. I was questioned just because I didn't look like an A student. Then one message caught my eye. It was from Jade, Ms. Eaton's teaching assistant. Just a single sentence. "I need to talk, but I'm scared of losing my job." I replied, "You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. But if something happened and you can prove it, we could change everything." An hour later, we met at a small cafe downtown. Jade looked even younger than I expected, maybe 22, 23. She was holding a folder and kept glancing around nervously. "I've seen her grade assignments," Jade began. At first, I thought she was just strict, but then I noticed same essays, same content. If the handwriting looked messy, it got a better grade. She opened her bag and pulled out photos, graded tests, essays, score sheets. Some were almost identical in content, 90% word for word, but one had a B+ and the other a D. The only differences, the handwriting and the student's name. "She grades based on names and zip codes," Jade said quietly. "If your name sounds ethnic or you live in a working class area, you're basically never getting above a C." I stared at the files, speechless. This wasn't personal anymore. That's when Eli reached out, a classmate. His dad's a professional font designer. He once got a B on an essay our English teacher said was brilliant. My dad's got handwriting analysis software, Eli said. He's worked in typography for over 15 years. If you've got samples from different years, he can prove your handwriting's authentic. Natural development over time. So I sent him everything. Elementary school assignments, my 8th grade journal, birthday cards, even the apology letter I wrote to my mom at age 10 after breaking her vase. The next morning, Eli handed me a thick folder, neatly bound. The analysis shows your handwriting has natural consistency over time. There are no anomalies, no signs of forgery, no irregular patterns. You're clean. And more importantly, no one could replicate this kind of evolution unless they lived it. I sat there stunned. For the first time, I was holding scientific proof, not feelings, not words, data. Right then, another email popped up. It was from Hannah Alvarez, a former teacher at Ms. Eaton's previous school in Boston. I saw the video, and I recognized the pattern. She did the same thing here. I was too afraid to speak back then, but I'm ready now. I set my phone down. My heart was pounding. I wasn't alone anymore. And the one thing every unjust system fears the most is when the victims begin to connect. We were no longer just those kids accused of having handwriting that was too good. We were a wave, and a wave never comes just once. 1 week ago, I was a student on the verge of losing my scholarship because of my handwriting. Now, I'm sitting in Emma's living room, right next to her mom, Mrs. Linda Brooks, a member of the local school board. Spread across the coffee table, stacks of documents, essays, messages, screenshots, handwriting analyses, and even testimony from a former teacher. Mrs. Brooks opened her laptop, looked at me, and said, "If this were just a personal complaint, the school could brush it off. But if it's systemic, they won't be able to run from it." And she was right. Within 48 hours, the pieces started falling into place. Jade, the teaching assistant, sent over 15 more essays from students who'd been graded unfairly, all from low-income families. Every single one marked with comments like, "Too perfect to be authentic." 3 juniors reached out privately. 1 lost their spot in honors. 1 got cut from the academic decathlon team for having a C in history. Another was made to rewrite their essay in the middle of the schoolyard because their handwriting looked too fake. Tommy dug up an old email from last year. Ms. Eaton had refused to write his recommendation letter because his handwriting shows signs of dishonesty. A single mom named Mrs. Diaz forwarded an email Ms. Eaton had sent her. "I'm concerned your son may be receiving help beyond acceptable levels. His penmanship is unusually advanced for his demographic. No one writes something like that unless the prejudice is already buried deep inside them. But the strongest blow came from someone I never expected. Ms. Parker, our English teacher. She was always quiet in staff meetings. Until one afternoon, she sent me an audio recording from a department meeting 3 months ago. In it, Ms. Eaton said, "I have to be stricter. These kids know how to fake writing, especially the scholarship ones. They're desperate. They'll try anything." In the background, you can hear awkward chuckles. And then, silence. No one pushed back. I sent the audio to Emma. She forwarded it to her mom. Her mom sent it to the entire school board. The story was no longer just about a single classroom. Other parents started talking. They began comparing stories. A Facebook group popped up overnight. By morning, it had over 40 members, all parents of students who had taken Ms. Eaton's history class. One said her child was denied a scholarship, Another shared how her son dropped out because he lost faith in himself. One parent even posted a video of her daughter crying in her bedroom, asking, "Why is trying my best still not enough?" And they all had one thing in common: beautiful handwriting and poverty. At that point, I stopped calling this drama with a teacher. I started calling it a resistance. That afternoon, I walked into the assistant principal's office. I placed all the documents in a black folder, set it on the desk, and said, "I know you probably won't do anything, but I want you to know, if this school chooses to stay silent, we won't." He didn't say a word, just stared at me, eyes filled with worry. Because for the first time, he knew this wasn't just a conflict between a student and a teacher. This was a fire, and that fire was spreading through the entire school. That Tuesday, the sky was overcast, gray and heavy, just like the mood that had hung over South Ridge High these past few weeks. By early morning, the parking lot was already packed. Parents, students, teachers, everyone arrived earlier than usual. No one wanted to miss the special school board meeting, the one where, for the first time, the name Valerie Eaton would be addressed publicly. I wore the white button-up shirt my mom had ironed the night before. In my hands was a heavy folder. Heavy not just with paper, but with weeks of waiting, frustration, and hope. My mom walked beside me, holding my hand tight, just like she used to before I got my shots as a kid. The meeting room was packed. People stood along the walls and spilled into the hallway. The school board sat in front, nameplates lined neatly on the table. At the center was a single microphone, where each speaker would step forward, one by one. The board chair opened the session. "We are holding this meeting to hear concerns regarding recent allegations of discriminatory grading and teaching practices at South Ridge High." And then they came forward. One mother broke down as she told the story of her son, once an honor student, who lost his scholarship over a mysterious D on a paper he never got feedback on. A student shared how they were forced to rewrite an essay during lunch, banned from using a computer because their handwriting was too perfect to be real. A teacher, voice trembling, admitted he had heard Ms. Eaton say she graded based on names and zip codes, but stayed silent out of fear. Then it was my turn. I stepped up to the mic, hands slightly shaky, but my voice was clear. "I'm not here to ask for my grade back. I'm here for the students who lost opportunities and never understood why. For the friends I saw crying in the bathroom, thinking they weren't good enough, just because of how they write." I laid out all the evidence, the handwriting analysis, emails, graded papers, meeting recordings. After me, Jade stepped up. She brought a thick file of essays, all graded unfairly, all written by students with names that didn't sound American enough. Then the board called Ms. Eaton to speak. The room fell silent. She appeared with a man in a gray suit, likely her lawyer. She looked around the room, but couldn't meet anyone's eyes. She began in a flat, rehearsed tone. "I've always upheld high academic standards. I never intended to discriminate. I simply believe academic integrity is under threat." There was no apology, no ownership, not a single student mentioned by name. With every word she spoke, the room grew colder. Then a board member asked, "How do you explain the email referencing demographic concerns?" She hesitated. Her lawyer cut in. "That quote is taken out of context." Then a teacher raised his hand. It was Mr. Peterson from the science department. He testified that he once saw Ms. Eaton assign grades before reading papers just by looking at student names. He had photos. And just like that, the dam broke. More teachers stood up. One shared a warning she once received. "Don't overteach the poor kids. They can't maintain high performance." Another said Ms. Eaton had called a student over-polished just because his writing sounded too articulate. After 3 tense hours, the board chair spoke again. "We will now recess for private deliberation." Everyone waited, holding their breath. 30 minutes later, the board returned. Their faces were serious, but resolute. After reviewing all submitted materials, testimonies, and evidence, we have decided Ms. Valerie Eaton is hereby suspended from duty, effective immediately, pending a full internal investigation. Additionally, we are initiating a district-wide grading policy review. A system that reflects bias is a system that must be repaired. The room erupted in applause. Some parents cried. Teachers reached for one another. I looked at my mom. She didn't say anything. She simply placed her hand on my shoulder, the way she always did when I was little and had just done something big. I didn't smile, because I knew justice had only just begun. The morning after the hearing, I walked into school, and for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel like a battlefield. No more suspicious glances, no more eyes that looked away. Instead, something strange, a quiet kind of respect. A freshman nodded to me in the hallway. One of the janitors smiled softly, placing her hand over her heart as I passed by. Mr. Peterson, the teacher who spoke out during the hearing, left me a handwritten note on my desk. "You did what most adults couldn't." In my inbox, an email from the Arizona State Scholarship Board. They were reopening my application after reviewing evidence that I had been unfairly impacted by a teacher's misconduct. At the bottom, a single line: "Thank you for standing up for what's right." I was also invited to meet with the school counselor, not for discipline this time, but to talk about college. She looked at me and said, "3 universities have already called about you. They said you're welcome to resubmit your college essay. And they're very interested in your story." A week later, I received a handwritten letter from the University of Southern California. It contained a line I will never forget. "We don't just want students with good grades. We want students who change the system for the better." I sat alone on the back steps of the school, reading that letter 3 times. No cameras, no audience, no applause, just me, and a warmth that filled my chest. I had chosen the right path. The friends who once dropped out of history class because of Ms. Eaton were invited back to finish their credits in a new section taught by Ms. Martinez, our new teacher. We met after class, laughing, comparing grades, sharing stories like people just freed from a long storm. As for my mom, the woman who never liked technology, she now has a Facebook account, and she's part of a group called Parents for Educational Equity. She's no longer just my mom, she's now a leader. She started conversations with school leaders, helped other parents learn their rights, and stood up for kids too young to speak for themselves. In my new class, our first essay was graded anonymously. No names, no demographic info, just content. And I got an A+. When I received the paper, I didn't cry, but I smiled. A light, easy smile, like I had finally set down the weight I'd been carrying for far too long. Not because I needed the grade, but because for the first time in a very long time, I was seen for who I truly am. That spring, I officially received acceptance letters from 3 universities. Inside the envelope from USC, my dream school, along with the offer letter was a small, handwritten note. "Your handwriting is beautiful, but your courage, that's what impressed us most." It was signed by the director of admissions. I held that note, my hands slightly trembling, not out of shock, but because I knew that finally my voice had broken through the prejudice others tried to trap me in. After graduation, I chose to keep just one thing from this entire journey: My first handwriting notebook from when I was 7. The first page was still intact. The purple ink faded, but the words still clear. Practice makes perfect. I packed it in my suitcase, bringing it with me to college, not as a reminder of pain, but as a promise that what you build with your own 2 hands will always belong to you, no matter who tries to deny it. I'm no longer angry at Ms. Eaton. I just feel sad that she looked at students not through their potential, but through her prejudice. And in doing so, she limited herself, not us. The fight we started over a single exam led to district-wide changes. All handwritten tests are now graded anonymously. An independent grade appeal system was introduced. Every teacher must complete unconscious bias training. And a brand new position was created, Equity Officer for Education. I used to think I was just a student, but I've learned that one voice, spoken at the right time with conviction, can shake an entire system. As I walked out of that high school one final time, I looked back at the familiar hallways, the ones that used to make me feel small, the ones that made me question my worth. But this time I walked lightly. No more bracing, no more shrinking, because I knew I didn't just survive. I rewrote the rules, and this time I did it in my own handwriting.